So this is really the big question, isn't it? Why is this becoming such a big deal, particularly for young people? You know, if we can really get to the bottom of the why, that's our first step towards actually making a difference and helping people build healthier lives.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at why it's a growing concern. Then we'll talk about the specific substances people are using. After that, we'll get into how addiction actually happens, the serious effects it has, and most importantly, what we can do about it through prevention and getting help.
All right, let's start with our first section, a growing concern. And here's the bottom line. The use of drugs and alcohol among young folks is going up. There's just no way around it. And because of that, making sure they have the right information and guidance isn't just a nice to have, it's become incredibly urgent. They need it to navigate all the risks out there. Okay, so if we're going to talk about this problem, we have to know exactly what we're talking about, right? Let's break down some of the most commonly abused substances. They generally fall into a few main groups.
First on the list, we have opioids. Now, what these do is they latch onto special receptors in our central nervous system. The one you've probably heard of most is heroin, often called smack. It's a really powerful depressant that actually comes from the poppy plant, the very same plant that gives us morphine.
And it doesn't really matter how someone takes it, whether it's snorted or injected, the effect is the same. Heroin is a major depressant. And what that means is it literally slows your whole body down, your breathing, your heart rate, all the essential stuff. And that, right there, is what makes it so incredibly dangerous.
Okay, next up, cannabinoids. These are a whole different class of chemicals. They interact with a different set of receptors, mostly found in the brain. And as you probably know, they come from the flowers of the cannabis sativa plant.
Now, this single plant gives us a whole range of products. You've got marijuana, hashish, charas, ganja, the list goes on. People usually inhale or eat them, but here's a key point. Their biggest known impact is actually on the cardiovascular system. Think heart and blood vessels. Then we flip to the other side of the spectrum with coca alkaloids, or what most of us just call cocaine. So where heroin is a depressant that slows you down, cocaine is a major stimulant. It completely messes with the way our brain uses dopamine. That's our natural feel-good neurotransmitter. The result? A huge, intense rush of euphoria and energy. But you know, the list doesn't stop with illegal drugs. We also have to talk about prescription medications being misused. Things like barbiturates, amphetamines, and benzodiazepines. And hey, even something totally legal like tobacco is a huge part of this conversation. The nicotine in it is an alkaloid that jacks up your blood pressure and heart rate. And then there are natural hallucinogens from plants like Atropa belladonna and datura.
So this all leads to a really critical question. How does someone go from just trying something once or twice to full-blown addiction? What does that journey, that path to dependence actually look like? Let's dig into that.
Think about adolescence, that time from about 12 to 18 years old. It's really like a bridge, you know, connecting childhood to adulthood. And that bridge can be pretty shaky. It's a time of massive changes, not just physically, but mentally and psychologically, which makes it a really vulnerable time for a person's development.
So what gets a young person to even start experimenting? Well, it's almost never just one thing. It's usually a mix of stuff, kind of like a perfect storm. You've got natural curiosity, that need for adventure and excitement. Then you pile on the stress from school, and of course that huge pressure from friends to fit in or seem cool.
Okay, this next part is super important. We need to be really clear on the difference between addiction and dependence. They sound similar, but they're not the same. Addiction, that's the psychological part. It's that mental attachment to the high, that feeling of well-being. Dependence, that's physical. It's when your body literally gets used to the drug and freaks out if you stop. That's what we call withdrawal syndrome, and it's awful.
And this is how people get trapped in a really vicious cycle. See, the more you use a substance, the more your body builds up a tolerance. Pretty soon, you need higher and higher doses just to get that same original feeling. This pushes you to take more, which only deepens the addiction and the physical dependence. It's a feedback loop that's incredibly hard to break.
So what happens when that cycle really takes hold? Well, the consequences are huge. It's like dropping a stone in a pond. The ripples spread out and affect everything and everyone around the person.
So what are the warning signs we should look out for? It's usually not just one isolated thing. It's a whole pattern of changes. Things like grades suddenly dropping, or skipping school for no reason. Maybe a lack of interest in personal hygiene. And big mood shifts are a major red flag.
becoming withdrawn and isolated, depressed, or suddenly aggressive and rebellious. Also look for big changes in relationships or sleeping and eating habits.
And the physical effects can be really specific depending on the drug. Let's take anabolic steroids, something athletes sometimes abuse. The side effects are pretty severe, and they hit males and females differently. For females, you might see things like increased aggressiveness, a deeper voice, and excessive hair growth. For males, we're talking about things like acne, mood swings, decreased sperm production, and even shrinking testicles. For both, there's a serious risk of kidney and liver problems.
And when you zoom out, the broader consequences are just devastating. If someone is using drugs intravenously, with needles, they're at a huge risk for infections like AIDS and hepatitis B. Long-term use can wreck the nervous system and the liver, leading to things like cirrhosis. But the damage isn't just physical. It causes so much mental and financial pain for family and friends. And the absolute worst-case scenario is always there, coma or even death from an overdose.
But listen, this is not a hopeless situation. Far from it. That brings us to our final and maybe most important section, how we can take back control. It's all about prevention and knowing how to seek help.
There's that old saying, prevention is better than cure. And when we're talking about this issue, especially with young people, that saying has never been more true. It really is the key.
So what does that prevention strategy look like? Well, you can think of it as having 5 main pillars. First, we have to help young people avoid undue peer pressure. Second, it's about education and counseling, giving them the real facts. Third is making sure they know they can seek help from parents and friends. Fourth is on us, looking out for those danger signs we talked about. And finally, number 5, being ready and willing to get professional and medical help when it's needed.
So let's wrap this up with a final thought, a question for you to take with you. Now that we've gone through the risks, the effects, and the steps for prevention, what's one thing, just one step, no matter how big or small, that you or your community could take starting today? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.